Well, let's talk to Labour's National Campaign Coordinator, Pat Mcfadden. Lots to talk to you about, Pat, as always, and it is good to see you. But we've got to start by saying, what did Sir Keir say to Lindsay Hoyle to make him change the rules in the way that he did?
We made representations to the Speaker, just like every party did, to have the proposition that we drafted on this very important issue of what's going on in the Middle East considered before the House. And the Speaker took the decision in good faith. He thought that because of the importance of this and the different views in the different political parties, he would allow 3 votes, one on the SNP's proposition, one on Labour's proposition, and one on the one put forward by the government, the Conservative Party. And he took that decision in good faith, and there should have been 3 votes, but the extraordinary thing that happened was about an hour before the vote was due to take place, the government withdrew their proposition, and that's important because it meant not only that there wouldn't be 3 votes, but that the SNP resolution probably wouldn't be reached. That's not the Speaker's fault. He had every right to expect the government to put forward their proposition to the vote, and I can only assume that they took that decision because they didn't have the numbers on their own side, and that's not the Speaker's fault.
Oh, come on. I mean, I mean, with the greatest of respect, that goes against everything which is doing the rounds this morning, including claims made to senior political reporters that Labour threatened to withhold support for Mr Speaker after a general election if he didn't help them now.
It's just not true. We certainly made representations to have our proposition considered, but we've got the highest respect for Mr Speaker, and I feel bad for him today because he's taking the blame and apologising for a situation that he couldn't have foreseen when he took that decision. Who would have thought that the government of the day didn't even have the numbers on its own side on a foreign policy proposition, and that their decision to withdraw from the debate would effectively crater the plan that the Speaker had put together to make sure that all 3 propositions could be voted on. I do feel bad for him today, but I don't think the scenes last night could have been foreseen by him, because he would have thought that the government would turn up and have their proposition voted on.
Well, 33 MPs have now signed a no-confidence motion in Sir Lindsay Hoyle. Do you think he should go? Do you think he should resign?
No, I don't think he should go. I see no reason why his position should be under threat because of this. It's not his fault that the government didn't have the numbers on their own side and that we ended up with those scenes last night. He was trying on an issue that's very, people have got very strong feelings about, to make sure that all 3 propositions could be considered. And although it was a departure from precedent, the clerk who issued the advice on this acknowledged that it wasn't a breach of the rules, that there's nothing in the common standing orders to stop the Speaker taking that decision, that he'd every right to take that decision, and that he did so for this good faith reason that he wanted all 3 propositions from the 3 biggest parties in Parliament to be considered, precisely because of the strength of feeling on this issue in the country. So I feel bad for the Speaker today, and I don't think his position should be threatened, and I hope that those who signed that resolution saying it should be were maybe acting in a bit of temper, and they'll reflect a bit more calmly this morning.
So you feel bad for the Speaker this morning. Perhaps then the spotlight should be on Sir Keir Starmer, who seems to have gone under the radar in all of this, in what is another U-turn, isn't it? He's changed his stance on a ceasefire in Gaza, and also questions to answer about this supposed backroom deal between him and Sir Lindsay Hoyle.
There's no backroom deal. Political parties make representations to the Speaker all the time. The Prime Minister regularly meets the Speaker. The chief whips of all the parties regularly meet the Speaker. The proposition that we put forward yesterday said not only should the fighting stop, but that we need to have a secure future for both Israel, to make sure a repeat of October the 7th can never happen again, that Hamas can't just dust themselves down and do that again, and a secure future for the Palestinians who are living in a desperate situation there. And even though an opposition day resolution is never going to have a direct impact, the reason we engaged in it was because there's going to be a general election in this country in the coming months. At that general election, we hope to be elected, and the proposition that we put before Parliament yesterday, which, remember, was the only thing passed by the House of Commons last night, not the government's, not the SNP's, the Labour proposition, set out the approach that we will take if we're fortunate enough to be elected whenever that election comes.
Well, I mean, to be fair, because of the circumstances, as you well know, it was passed on the nod and not for any other reason. However, people can legitimately say, can't they, why has Keir Starmer changed his tune on this when it's only a few months ago he was prepared to see councillors resign, he was prepared to see some members of his front bench resign over the fact he wouldn't support calls for a ceasefire. Now he is.
But it's not enough just to say make it stop. You've got to say let's make sure it doesn't happen again. And that's really the difference between the SNP proposition and the Labour proposition yesterday. It's not enough just to say we've got to make this stop. We have to make sure it can't happen again. And that means facing up to the fact that Hamas can't just dust themselves down, regroup and try to do what they did on October the 7th in a year or 2 years. And if the international community is going to call for a two-state solution for the Palestinians to have a state, which is something we strongly support, then it's got to be a situation where both Israel and Palestinians can live in security. That was set out in our proposition. It wasn't in the SNP proposition, and that's why it's a much more comprehensive proposition to put before Parliament. And I do repeat, the only thing that Parliament passed at the end of that raucous debate last night.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pat Mcfadden. Thank you.
Good to see you this morning. I don't know, I think that's a bit of a tenuous line saying it passed. Well, it did pass technically, but as they say, on the nod, because just about everybody else walked out.
But it is a U-turn, is it not? I mean, resisting calls for a ceasefire about a month ago, and now saying there should be an immediate ceasefire. I mean, that is a U-turn.